Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So it's a joyful time for me to be having the winter retreat. It's about 10 days and I can see the nuns community is very much quietened down, and it's nice to be having that quiet space. Everybody very much into the group practice and no meetings. So that's the wonderful space to be, and thanks to the Winter Retreat support team who have volunteered to support the community, the whole community, to concentrate more on our formal practice. So much gratitude and appreciation for the Winter Retreat support team for being here, so that the monastic community can put down the duties to a certain extent and put more effort to have time and put more time, have more time and put effort to concentrate on the formal practice. So Anumodana to the Winter Retreat support team. And so I have been invited to give some reflection by Ajahn Khemaka. So I'll see what comes up. So what we are supposed to do during this winter retreat time is developing the mind, cultivating the mind. And I just, when I was studying in Sri Lanka, we had to learn the Dhammapada just to pass the exams, That's why I learned it. But somehow, some of those verses, most of those verses I learned, stuck with me for one reason or the other. I'm glad they stuck with me. So one thing I remember very well is, I do remember the verse, even it was about more than 50 years ago, to be honest, but I do still remember those verses. And I do remember one which is about training oneself. It goes like Attahi Attano Nato Kohinato Parosiya Attanahi Sudante Natang Labati Dullabang. This is something I learned from my O-levels. And I never forgot it for one reason or the other. And what it says is there's no self than oneself. Nobody else can help this self. And it says Attana Hisudantena, that is what Buddha means by that, is it's a well-trained mind. The self that is well-trained, a well-trained mind is something very rare, extremely rare. And I really loved that verse, though I didn't understand what it meant. But it felt good, learning it and knowing the meaning of it. So what is this well-trained mind we are all working at? Yes, there are many defilements that enter the mind, and these defilements stay as dormant stage most of the time. Well, it's there in all of us till we reach the full enlightenment, according to the Buddhist teachings. So these dormant defilements that are sleeping, they enter the mind. Seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, thinking. And when they enter the mind, they can just enter the mind, and if we just took the precepts, everybody took the precepts. So that's the idea of precepts. They can enter the mind, but don't have to act on it, don't have to speak on it. The precepts help us not to act on it or speak with a defiled mind. So that's the beauty of the precepts. So that's a kind of it's a wealth, having this moral code and having these precepts. So these defilements enter the mind, but we don't act on it. And sometimes we do. Well, that's the next stage of these defilements. But what the Buddha's teachings are pointing to is how to work with these defilements. And that's what the concentration practice does. The concentration practice does is we can suppress these defilements. And so we suppress the defilements to a certain extent. That's what the concentration practice does. There are many ways of concentration practices, remembering Buddha's qualities, remembering the qualities of the Dhamma, or even visualizing light. There are lots of concentration practices one can do. So when we do these, what happens is it suppresses these defilements temporarily. And but once the concentration is gone, they do enter the mind. So we notice that they are still there. So that's the insight meditation. That's what the insight meditation does, is the uprooting of these defilements. So that's what we are encouraged most of the time, to investigate and observe what happens in the mind, what enters the mind. And a concentrated mind, when we have a concentrated mind, we can see these things arising in the mind. So that's the whole idea of the concentration practice, and followed by the insight meditation. So what is this kind of investigation we have to do? Well, what the Buddha recommends is investigate this mind and body. We have this mind and body. And what can we investigate about this mind and body? When we take the body, it's from the day we got conceived in the womb up to this date, it has changed so much. So it never stays the same. All these cells keep changing. There's nothing that keeps stable or what we can call as something permanent. So we chanted the Anattalakkana Sutta this evening. So that's what we are supposed to observe and investigate, to develop the insight, to understand our true nature. So these bodies, they're nothing but the four elements, the earth, water, fire and air. These elements are around everywhere. These elements are within this body, internally, and these elements are there externally. But there's no difference between the earth element externally or the earth element internally. It helps to, that's the solidity. The earth element is the solidity. Because of this solidity, we can stand up and walk. So it's the same solidity that exists externally and internally. And when it comes to the water element, it's the fluidity, the cohesion, which binds things together. So it's the same, that element, externally and internally. And the heat, the maturing aspect of these bodies, it's the same externally, internally, and it's the same for the air. So if we look at it, our bodies in this way, we can see that there's nothing that we can call as me and mine. The more we can investigate in this way and do the insight meditation, that's the mind development Buddha was talking about. So I suppose we have to do it and experience it for ourselves. The more we do this investigative work about the body, the more we understand that there's nothing, we can't call this body as me and mine. And that's what we were chanting with the Anattalakkana Sutta. If it is impermanent and if it is unsatisfactory, is it worth calling me and mine? That's the question Buddha was asking and expounding in most of the suttas, really, and most occasions. So that's how we can investigate this body. And we can see the same with our parents, grandparents. I mean, how their bodies have changed. It's not only this body, everything, all the bodies around us are changing. And when you can see how much they have changed, and it's seeing that aging process. It can be frightening, yes, if everything is changing. But at the same time, it's that helps us to understand the first noble truth. This is the unsatisfactoriness Buddha was talking about in the first noble truth. That we get born, get old, and die. It's common to all of us. It's nothing personal. So we can understand this situation with our body and all the bodies around us. So we can do this, it's the same, we can do the same with the mind as well. I think the mind changes more rapidly than the body. It changes every minute. Every feeling, every perception, every thought, and the consciousness. It comes to life and it dies. Every feeling arises and it changes. Because it changes, we chase after the same feeling again and again and again. So when you think of the feelings, there are these three kinds of feeling: the pleasant feeling, the unpleasant feeling, and the neutral feeling. So a pleasant feeling is using a pleasant object gives us a pleasant feeling. Contact with a pleasant object, and then we chase after this feeling. So Buddha said to treat this pleasant feeling as a painful feeling. What he meant by that? What did he mean by that? Because that's the very nature of the pleasant feeling. Yes, when we see something pleasant, we get the perception of happiness, the sukha sanya. And that leads to having the pleasant feeling in the body or pleasant feeling in the mind. But it doesn't last because the feeling dies. That's the nature of these feelings. So what happens is then we have to recreate it. We immediately want to create the same feeling again and again. And with that process, trying to recreate this feeling to make us happy, the tanha arises. And this is the second noble truth. That's where the origin of dukkha, the dukkha samudaya, the tanha arise in the mind, because we need to recreate that feeling again and again. We haven't understood the true nature of the feelings. So the more we can observe and understand these things, it's so beautiful that the Dhamma comes together. Through investigation and through observing this mind, we can see it all happening within this mind and body. So that's what the feeling of pleasure does. Well, I think the feeling of displeasure, the unpleasant feeling, Buddha asked us to consider it as a dart. I suppose we start with unpleasant feeling. It can only get unpleasant. You can't expect any more than that from an unpleasant feeling. I suppose that must be why it's to be considered as a dart. And then the neutral feelings, I think he compared it to the dukkha arising out of formations. So the pleasant feeling, it doesn't give us long-lasting happiness. It has this changing nature, so it gives us dukkha, nothing but dukkha. The pleasant feeling, because it changes, and because of this changing nature, we are chasing after it, so that gives rise to dukkha. And the painful feeling, it's like a dart, so that gives us dukkha. And this sankhara dukkha, which is dukkha arising out of formations, because the formations are a fabrication, yes, it's a fabrication, it's a construction. If it's fabricated, if it's constructed, it wouldn't give us lasting happiness, because we are chasing things, and the word sankhara is anything is everything, and anything and everything is sankhara. You can easily compare it to our day-to-day life, house hunting. We all know about house hunting, job hunting. How many houses people see before they settle down to the house they eventually buy. But that's not the perfect house. But we still buy because we are fed up of house hunting and settle down to this house we think will do good. So we are constantly settling for the second best. I'm sure we do the same with the partners, So we are constantly settling for the second best, and that they never give us happiness, So it takes a while to realize this is what's really happening in living this life. These things will never give us lasting happiness because they keep changing. And it's the Anattalakkhana Sutta we chanted, explain it very well. If we explore that theme, if there's nothing permanent, if everything is changing all the time, that will not give us lasting happiness. It's bound to give unsatisfactoriness, because anything that's changing can't give us satisfactoriness, long-lasting happiness. So if it's changing and if it can't give us long-lasting happiness, how can it be me and mine? So that statement explains it all, but I suppose understanding it within ourselves, it's another matter. But it makes sense when you hear it, when you chant it. But the more we can do it, that's the beauty of this meditation practice. The more we can train the mind in this way, it becomes alive. And that's the whole idea of training the self, the well-trained mind. That never leaves us. We can take it from one life to another. That's training that happens in one lifetime. We take it with us. Nobody can steal it. Nobody knows what's going on inside. That's a kind of a wealth. So this kind of wealth, yes, there's wealth in tangible things, but this kind of wealth we can develop, the wealth of sila, the virtue, the wealth of wisdom. That's how we can develop wisdom within ourselves. This kind of meditation, this kind of reflection make us truly understand this human nature. And also, it's this kind of wisdom which one can develop. It can be explained in many different ways. Having empathy towards others, and having the ability to evaluate the good and bad in someone or some situation, and not get disturbed by the negative influence which prevails. That is wisdom. We don't get caught into that negative influence. And the more we can develop this kind of empathy, I think we can understand each other well. And that leads to understanding the First Noble Truth as well, because we are all in the same boat. We are all experience the unsatisfactoriness, the lacking, constantly lacking, wanting, nothing is good enough, discontentment. We are never contented with what we have. That kind of contentment, to develop that kind of contentment, to be happy with what we have rather than constantly seeking for something else. And we all do it. So the more we can understand this nature in human beings, we are able to understand each other better as well. So understanding the First Noble Truth really opens our mind to live in a harmonious way, because we see each other in the same way, who is going through the same dukkha. And we can understand it because we go through the same things. If I know what I'm going through, I can understand what others are going through. So that way we have the great capacity to open our minds to embrace all human beings and understanding their dukkha as well as the dukkha one is experiencing. And that can only happen through Buddha's teachings. So it's a great opportunity to be able to do this. I find it's a great opportunity to be born into a human existence and having the teachings available today. Well, not to waste this lifetime, not knowing how many lifetimes I have wasted. And it reminds me of a verse. Buddha said that we have been roaming around in samsara from one boom to another for eons and eons by not listening to Buddha's teachings. We didn't take heed of the teachings, and we took the sankharas, the formations, as me and mine. That's why we are roaming in this samsara from womb to womb for eons and eons. It's a long verse, but it's a beautiful verse if you contemplate on it. How we get born again and again because of chasing some feeling, and how a perception evaluates this feeling, and we create the sankharas. And the mind is constantly moving from one to another. And that's basically it, what we are doing. And then there's the faculties, the 5 faculties we are supposed to develop. That's why the mindfulness faculty helps to overcome the sensual desire, the thoughts of sensual desire. Because the more we are mindful, when the mindfulness faculty is developed, we understand the arising of these sensual desires. And the concentration faculty helps us to overcome the thoughts of ill will. The more the mind is concentrated, not to follow the thoughts of ill will. And it's the effort, the faculty of effort, overcomes the thoughts of cruelty, because the effort we have to put is only to overcome the unwholesome and prevent the unwholesome arising. And maintain the wholesome and make maintain the wholesome that have arisen, and develop unwholesome things that haven't arisen yet. So that's the effort faculty. And I think the understanding, if you develop the understanding faculty with having the right view, we can eradicate the thoughts that are arising in the mind. We can straight away recognize these thoughts that are not profitable and eradicate them. And the faith faculty checks all the other four faculties. It keeps the concentration and the mindfulness and the effort and the understanding faculty. So the faith faculty, that's what the faith faculty does. This is what I've understood by reading the teachings. So developing faith arises. I mean, we have faith in sportsmen, sports people, actors, actresses, because of their performance, isn't it? Because if they perform well, we develop faith in them. And when they don't perform well, we follow somebody else. So, but this faith, the faith as in Buddhist, according to Buddhist teachings, is based on understanding. We have understood the teachings and the faith arising out of that, because we have seen that it works. The mind can be developed, that we can not act on anger, and we can see that the arising of anger is not imminent anymore, or we can see that the anger has arisen, or we don't act on anger. So we can see the results for ourselves, and the faith arising out of that is what Buddha is talking about as in faith, saddha in Buddha's teachings. So the more we practice in this way, our faith can be developed. And the more we develop faith, it gives us joy because we see the results for ourselves. It uplifts the mind because the mood of the mind is what matters. If we start the day with a bad mood, the whole day is, spoiled. So how do we uplift the mind, So we can clearly see what the mind does when the mind is concentrated. Whether the mind is in a good mood, the quality of the mind, the mood of the mind. Because we have that capacity. Because how we give attention to things, everything is born out of attention. If we give wise attention or unwise attention. Because these 5 sense doors, the 5 sense chords, or the eye cognizes the form, the ear cognizes the sound, the nose cognizes the smell, the tongue cognizes taste, and the body cognizes tactile objects. This is how the whole thing begins, how much attention we give to these objects. And the first contact happens when the eye contacts the external object, but we then deliberate it in the mind. The second contact happens in the mind. So that contact, we have the capacity, we can sit here, I can sit here and think of Sri Lanka for that matter. I'm not at the moment. That's how we can, the mind has that capacity, the contact. We can contact, the mind can contact anything if we want to. But that's how the whole thing begins. The whole world we live in begins with that contact. So if we keep a check on this contact, everything arises of this contact. So if we are aware that in this present moment, I'm contacting something in the past, it could be somebody who passed away or a loved one, or we can sit here and think about your home or your job, which you have left behind, and then it manifests in the mind. But if we recognize that's what I'm doing in the present, bringing something from the past. So that contact we have the capacity to recognize this is what's happening in this moment. And do I follow it? Or do I really need to follow this? And that's where the mindfulness and concentration, with that contact, the feeling arises. So then only the mindfulness and the concentration can kick in and use the wisdom which we have developed. Do I follow this? Does it lead to any benefit? Or is it beneficial or not? So this is the kind of practice Buddha was talking about when he was saying how we can train ourselves. The self that is well trained is a rare thing. And that self, Buddha was talking a lot. So there is this self that we need to develop. The self that is a well-trained self, well-trained mind. And I'm glad we have this opportunity again to say that we can do this training for these 3 months under the guidance of Ajahn Khemaka, and with the help of other monastics, all taking part in the group practice. And I find everybody is very quiet on our side. And that helps the atmosphere, and it makes a difference after being through a lot of activity, moving into the new sala. It hasn't been, an end of the year has been full of activity. So we have these 3 months to look forward to. Well, nearly 2.5 months, I suppose, to look forward to practice in this way, and be grateful for what we have here, and make the most of this time we have together as a community to practice in this way. Thank you for your attention.